Okay, so I guess we're coming back to another week of the presentations. So I decided to answer one of my questions that I did on the group discussion. So the one I'm trying to focus on this week is, am I awake to what really matters? So I got some good responses from that from the group. Adam said this about it. He said, "I feel like what you're asking requires a degree of self-assessment. Green does say that it's important how your values are grounded. I really liked this quote by her. I believe it important for teachers, no matter what their specialty, to be clear about how they ground their own values, their own conceptions of the good and of the possible. So I believe that it's possible to look at yourself and out if your morals and values are awake, and if they aren't, then you have a starting point." So that's what Adam had to say about it. I also got another response from Ava. She said this: "I think to be awake to what really matters depends on a lot. It depends on what your students value, what you value, what subject and age group you teach, and whether or not all those things coincide with each other. I think that you should be willing to handle the tough question that is, why is this important? Every single time you teach, if you can answer that question for yourself and for your students, then I think you are awake to what really matters." So that's what Ava had to say. I also decided to go back and reread over the history of philosophy and education, and I went back to Maxine Green, and I got some good quotes from her that I thought applied to this question that I'm asking. The first quote is, "One reason has to do with the overwhelming ordinariness of the lives we live. Another is our tendency to perceive our everyday reality as a given, objectively defined, impervious to change. Taking it for granted, we do not realize that reality, like all others, is an interpreted one. It presents itself to us as it does because we have learned to understand it in standard ways." The second quote I have is this: "Therefore, I believe it important for teachers, no matter what their specialty, to be clear about how they ground their own values, their own conceptions of the good and of the possible. Do they find their sanctions in some supernatural reality? Are they revealed in holy books or in the utterances of some traditional authority? Do they rather depend upon their own private intuitions of what is good and right? Do they deceive? Do they, sorry, do they decide in each particular situation what will best resolve uncertainty, what works out for the best? Do they simply refer to conventional social morality, to prevailing codes, or to the law, or do they refer beyond the law to some domain of principle or of norm? To what extent are they in touch with the actualities of their own experiences, their own biographies, and the ways in which they affect the tone of their encounters with the young? Teachers need to be aware of how they personally confront the unnerving question present in the lives of every teacher, every parent. What shall we teach them? How can we guide them? What hope can we offer them? How can we tell them what to do? So I thought that quote was really good. It had a lot of different questions that I was asking myself, it helped me to kind of reach further within. So I decided to ask the question, what can we do? I think it's important that we evaluate our morals. We need to be able to look at ourselves and ask questions that dig deeper into who we are, what we can do as people to influence change in ourselves and in our students. We need to not be afraid to do things that we wouldn't normally do. We need to be able to be open to changing our teaching habits, our direction. Um, I think that's important to be able to be a malleable material that can be molded because your students are going to be much the same. We need to be able to mold our students in the same way that we can mold ourselves. And we should be willing to perform regular self assessments on ourselves. Uh, to help gauge where we are in our own personal growth. Uh, I think going on to my own personal thoughts, I believe that it's important for us to ask ourselves what really matters to myself and to my students. As a teacher, I need to be open to change, but also be willing to question change. A teacher is responsible for the growth of their students, but how can I help students to grow if I am not willing to put forth the effort to grow myself? For me, my faith plays a large role in how I go about my daily life. I think if I could apply my faith and personal convictions to my teachings, it would help me to answer the question if I'm awake to what really matters. Anyway, that is all I had to say for this week. I know it's kind of a long one, but I had a lot to think about. So I hope you guys get something out of this, maybe learned a little bit more about how we can be awake to what really matters. All right, thanks, guys. I will see you in a couple weeks.